In the heart of corporate success, Alexander sat motionless behind his executive desk. The walls around him gleamed with accolades, each certificate a testament to his professional achievements. Yet his eyes held no pride, only a profound emptiness that no amount of recognition could fill. Colleagues saw a brilliant strategist, a man who commanded respect and admiration. What they failed to notice was how his gaze constantly drifted beyond their carefully constructed world, searching for something infinitely more meaningful than quarterly profits or boardroom victories. Those who worked closely with Alexander often remarked on his peculiar silence during meetings. While others filled rooms with confident proclamations and empty rhetoric, he would sit quietly, his mind wandering through intellectual territories they could never comprehend. His colleagues mistook his thoughtful pauses for disengagement, his measured responses for indifference. They could not fathom that within his stillness lay depths of understanding that made their shallow conversations feel like static noise in comparison to symphonic complexity. The office corridors buzzed with constant motion, a river of ambition flowing around Alexander as he moved with deliberate slowness. Colleagues rushed past him, their voices rising in excited discussions about promotions and projects. He observed them with the detached curiosity of an anthropologist studying unfamiliar tribes. Their enthusiasm seemed manufactured, their laughter hollow echoes that bounced off polished surfaces. To him, their world felt like a theater where everyone performed roles they had forgotten were merely costumes, not identities. During quarterly reviews, Alexander's presence became most noticeable for its absence. While department heads passionately defended their budgets and outlined ambitious goals, he would sit perfectly still, his mind exploring philosophical questions that rendered profit margins irrelevant. His team saw his silence as agreement, his blank expression as understanding. They could not perceive that he had already transcended their narrow concerns, traveling mentally to places where such earthly measurements held no meaning, where true significance dwelled in realms beyond balance sheets. In the privacy of his office after hours, Alexander would open his leather journal, its pages yellowed with years of secret thoughts. Here he could finally express the complexity that had been building within him all day. Mathematical formulas intertwined with poetic observations, philosophical inquiries merged with sketches of impossible geometric patterns. While his colleagues believed he spent evenings networking or resting, he was actually engaged in the only activity that could contain the vastness of his inner universe, pouring infinity onto finite paper. When the office emptied and silence finally claimed its rightful place, Alexander would ascend to the rooftop terrace. There, beneath the infinite canopy of stars, he could breathe again. The city's artificial lights seemed pathetic compared to celestial fires that had burned for millennia. He would stand there for hours, feeling simultaneously insignificant and profoundly connected to something eternal. His colleagues would never understand why he chose solitude over their company, not realizing that only in cosmic silence could his true self emerge from the prison of social expectations. His co-workers often wondered why Alexander seemed so unapproachable despite his friendly reputation. They did not realize he was perpetually elsewhere, his consciousness having already departed for territories they could not even imagine. During what appeared to be productive work sessions, his mind would drift through libraries of unwritten books, laboratories of impossible experiments, gardens of abstract beauty. To them he was simply quiet, but in truth he was engaged in conversations with versions of reality that existed only in the space between thought and expression. Even his therapist struggled to reach the core of Alexander's complexity. Week after week, he would sit politely, offering just enough of himself to satisfy professional requirements while keeping his true depths carefully hidden. She would ask probing questions about his feelings, his relationships, his ambitions, and he would respond with textbook answers that revealed nothing of substance. How could he explain that his loneliness stemmed not from lack of connection, but from the impossibility of finding anyone who could navigate the landscapes of his inner world? Social gatherings became elaborate performances for Alexander, intricate dances where he played the role of successful executive with practiced precision. He would smile at appropriate moments, laugh at carefully timed intervals, nod thoughtfully at industry gossip. His colleagues saw a man who fit seamlessly into their world, never suspecting that he was merely wearing their reality like an ill-fitting costume. The effort of maintaining this facade exhausted him, Yet he continued because withdrawal would invite questions he could not answer without revealing truths they were not equipped to understand. The roots of Alexander's isolation stretched back to his earliest memories, when other children were still fascinated by simple games while he was already grappling with concepts that would challenge adults. His parents had watched in amazement as their young son devoured encyclopedias, asked questions about quantum physics, and drew geometric patterns that seemed to emerge from some innate understanding of mathematical beauty. They had hoped his gifts would bring him friends, not realizing that the higher one climbs in intellectual pursuit, the more rarefied and lonely the air becomes. In high school, Alexander had learned to embrace his solitude as a sanctuary rather than a curse. While his peers gathered in noisy clusters, sharing jokes and planning social conquests, he found refuge among the stacks of the school library. Here he could explore the works of philosophers and scientists, diving into intellectual territories that felt more real than the superficial dramas of teenage existence. His teachers recognized his brilliance but could not bridge the gap between his mature understanding and his chronological age, leaving him perpetually suspended between worlds. His university years had offered brief glimpses of belonging, moments when he could engage with minds that approached his own level of complexity. In the sterile environment of research laboratories, surrounded by colleagues who spoke his language of logic and inquiry, he had felt almost normal. But even there, the fundamental disconnect remained. His insights often surpassed his peers, his questions delved deeper into theoretical territories, leaving him once again isolated at the frontier of human understanding where few dared to venture. The transition from academia to corporate life had felt like stepping into a foreign country where everyone spoke a language he had never learned. His new colleagues discussed quarterly reports and market strategies with enthusiasm that seemed genuine but felt hollow to his trained ear. He watched them navigate office politics with apparent ease, building relationships based on mutual benefit rather than intellectual compatibility. For the first time, he understood that his gifts might actually become obstacles in a world that valued conformity over originality. His apartment became his true temple, a place where he could finally remove the masks required by professional life. Here he could pursue his real passions without judgment or expectation. Philosophy texts lay open beside half-finished musical compositions, scientific treatises shared shelf space with volumes of poetry. He would spend entire evenings lost in these pursuits, his mind free to explore connections that would never occur to his colleagues, building bridges between disciplines they had never imagined existed. On weekends, Alexander would return to the university as a visiting auditor, attending lectures that fed his starving intellect. While his colleagues spent their free time on golf courses or shopping excursions, he sat in lecture halls, absorbing knowledge like a sponge. Philosophy professors spoke of existential questions that his corporate peers considered irrelevant, but to Alexander they represented the only conversations worth having. Here he could engage with ideas that mattered, even if he had to do so in relative solitude. After months of careful guarding, something began to crack in Alexander's therapeutic sessions. Perhaps it was the accumulation of loneliness, perhaps the weight of pretending had finally become too heavy. For the first time, he began to speak of the vast internal landscapes he inhabited, the intellectual territories he explored when others believed he was simply being quiet. His therapist listened with growing fascination, realizing she was witnessing something extraordinary, a mind so complex that ordinary human connection seemed inadequate to contain its energy. The breakthrough came gradually, like dawn breaking over a mountain range. Alexander began to describe the loneliness that came with his gifts, the way his insights often felt like burdens rather than blessings. He spoke of seeing patterns and connections that others missed, of understanding implications that made simple pleasure seem shallow. His therapist finally understood that his apparent emptiness was actually the opposite, a vessel so full that it could not contain its contents within the small vessels of ordinary conversation. Walking through the city after dark, Alexander felt the familiar pull between his inner world and the external reality around him. Thousands of people moved through the streets, each absorbed in their own dramas and desires, yet none seemed to notice the profound intelligence that walked among them. He envied their simplicity, their ability to find satisfaction in immediate pleasures and surface connections. At the same time, he could never have traded his depth for their contentment, knowing that to do so would be to lose himself entirely. Nature offered Alexander one of the few places where his complexity felt appropriate rather than burdensome. In parks and gardens, among trees that had witnessed centuries and birds that followed ancient migration patterns, he could think without feeling like an alien in human society. Here his contemplative nature seemed to belong, his tendency toward deep observation felt natural rather than antisocial. The rhythms of the natural world provided a context where his introspective tendencies made perfect sense. His late-night writing sessions became sacred rituals, times when he could finally express the thoughts that had been building within him all day. Page after page filled with insights that bridged disciplines, connections that revealed hidden patterns in human experience, theories that challenged conventional wisdom. He wrote for himself primarily, knowing that few others could appreciate the depth of his observations, but driven by the need to give form to the formless ideas that swirled constantly in his mind. Museums became another refuge where Alexander could engage with minds that had touched depths similar to his own. Standing before paintings that revealed layers of meaning, studying sculptures that captured human complexity in stone, he felt a kinship with artists who had also struggled to express the inexpressible. These creators understood something of his burden, the challenge of containing vast internal experiences within forms that others could comprehend, even if only partially. Music offered Alexander one of the few forms of communication that could match the complexity of his inner experience. While his colleagues preferred simple melodies and predictable rhythms, he was drawn to compositions that challenged listeners, pieces that demanded attention and rewarded depth. In concert halls, surrounded by strangers who shared his appreciation for artistic sophistication, he could finally feel something approaching understanding without having to explain himself or compromise his standards. The few times Alexander found someone who could truly engage with his thoughts, the experience felt like discovering an oasis in a desert of mediocrity. These conversations would continue for hours, weaving through topics that would bore his regular acquaintances, exploring ideas that required both participants to stretch their mental capacities. In these moments, he could finally relax his guard, knowing that his complexity was not only accepted but celebrated by someone who could navigate the same intellectual territories. Through years of careful self-examination and therapeutic guidance, Alexander had finally learned to accept his nature rather than fight against it. He understood now that his apparent emptiness was actually a protective mechanism, a way of preserving his inner richness from those who could not appreciate its value. He had learned to find satisfaction in his solitude, to see his complexity not as a curse but as a gift that made his experience of existence infinitely more profound than that of his simpler peers. In the end, Alexander had created a life that honored both his need for depth and his social responsibilities. He maintained his professional success while preserving spaces for his true self to flourish. His colleagues continued to see him as a quiet achiever, never suspecting that he had built an inner world so rich and complex that it could sustain him through decades of surface-level interactions. He had learned that authenticity sometimes required careful protection, and that wisdom often meant knowing when to reveal one's true nature and when to let others see only what they were capable of understanding.